All right. Hey, brother. It's really good to talk to you in person. I don't know if you do you remember meeting me at one time?
Yes.
Do you?
No, I don't.
That's what I thought. You had a booth at T4G. You
Oh,
were,
okay, cool.
I think you at least had some merch there with visual theology, and you were handing out
Oh, yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And there were a lot of people coming to talk to you, so it was a very short interaction.
Cool.
But it's cool to be able to spend some time with you here
Yeah.
in sort of in person.
And we've
Um,
interacted a few times through email and stuff as well.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
hopefully you can come over here in Iceland and join us one time, traveling with your family or something else.
That's the
But
plan. I just saw they cut all flights between Iceland and Canada for the year, so maybe next year.
yeah, yeah, it's a crazy time we live in right now.
It is,
But
yeah.
one of the reasons, so I wanted you to introduce yourself. But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because of a book you wrote, "Do More Better." I
Sure.
love the book, especially because part of my frustration is books that are very heavy on theoretical thinking and not really practical in its nature. And your book is a combination of both. You've got great theoretical thinking and the thinking behind productivity, doing it right, with the right goal in mind, that ultimately we want to glorify God with our time, and we want to glorify God in our work and in our families. And I think you just had an amazing way of putting it, but also into really practical steps about, here are some apps that I use and here's how I use them. And so some people, I don't know, do you have it on audiobook format right now?
I don't know. I think they did an audiobook format. Yeah, I think so.
Because I've been recommending it, but I'm not sure I can recommend the audiobook format, because there's just, you need to highlight some stuff and chew on it and maybe stop and think for a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
but I just wanted you to introduce yourself. You've got you're an avid blogger. The last thing I read about you was something like you've been blogging for 5,000 days straight, almost every single day.
Every single day, yeah. No,
Eh,
I've been doing it for a long time, and way back in the day, I decided I was being a really bad blogger. I was doing it very sporadically, so I decided I'm just going to blog every day for a year. If I can't do that, I'm going to quit. So I blogged every day for a year, and then just kind of kept it rolling. And I think we just hit 6,000 days of consecutive blogging.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I guess I was looking at an old post then about you.
yeah,
That is amazing. That is
yeah.
so you're not the type
It's
of guy
silly,
who's
yeah.
like, do what I say, not as I do type of guy. You're like,
It's all a little bit silly, but it just kind of fit with my personality. And after a while, like you do it for 2 years in a row, now you need a good excuse not to write. Like
yeah.
it becomes kind of the opposite. Like I got to find a really good reason to not write. The day I don't, it's going to feel like something really significant. So I just kind of been waiting for that day. I'll probably get COVID-19 or something. That'll be the day, and you know.
Oh man, that's so horrible thought. So you've been God's obviously blessed your ministry in many ways. You've had influences, had an influence all around the world, even here in Iceland. I remember probably 4 years back, a member of our church introduced me to the website, which is timchallies.com.
Challies.com. Yeah.
Challies.com. Okay. And you've got great resources there. We've used them in our small groups, in our men's groups, about productivity and that type of stuff. Now, a
Good.
lot of people are going to laugh at the fact that I was influenced by your book, especially because I'm sort of known for not being very scheduled and that type of stuff. Now, I want I want to first introduce yourself. Like, what are you doing? I know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I live outside Toronto in Ontario, Canada. I'm married to Aileen. We've been married for 22-ish years, and we
Hmm.
got three kids: a daughter who's just about to turn 14, a daughter who's 17, and my son who is 20. We're all at home right now. My son's usually down at seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. He goes to the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. My daughter's going down to Boyce College in August in theory. But for now, like everyone else, we're all in the house together. And waiting out this little lockdown we're in. So yeah, I'm an elder at Grace Fellowship Church. I've been an elder there for about 10 years. I've been on staff before, but I'm currently not on staff. And what I do with my days is I write. I write on my blog and I write the occasional book.
Man, that's amazing. So you got a busy schedule. One of the things that I really loved about your book is your thinking behind why we want to be productive, why we want to use our time wisely. And I like the fact that even in the title, it's not just do more. In an age where there's, I don't know, it just seems to me that people are so scatterbrained and there's so many things to do, and things pushing you to do more, but your whole emphasis is no, let's do more and better, do it to the glory of God. And can you just describe to our people, because what I'm thinking with this is doing a couple of interviews with some people that I think would be helpful for our church and maybe someone beyond our church,
Sure.
is, okay, we're in this COVID-19 thing right now. A lot of people's schedules have been turned upside down. A lot of people who may not be Christians, who find their identity in other things such as work and so on and so forth, their schedule has been disrupted. They may be looking for content, which I'm hoping they run into ours, or get to listen to you. What is your whole thinking behind productivity, and how we
Yeah.
should do it and why we should do it?
You're joking earlier about being disorganized and all that. I'm a naturally disorganized person as well. I mean, I like things to be organized. I'm just not good at it. So I like an organized house. I like an organized office, but also I'm kind of lazy and I can just let things decay. And so I was running my own business. I was an elder at the church. I was, father, husband, all these different things, and just finding my life was chaotic. And so I did what a lot of people do, which is kind of go online and look for like the BuzzFeed approach of 10 quick, easy, simple fixes. You do these 10 things and all your problems will go away. And lo and behold, that didn't work. And so I started like going to the productivity section in the bookstore, Amazon, and started reading those books. And there was some really good stuff there, but it was also not Christian. It was essentially find out what fulfills you, makes you feel complete, makes you feel fulfilled, whatever it is, and then go and do those things. And I found that approach pretty empty as well, even though some of the logistics of it were good. And even though I could do some of the implementation stuff, it still wasn't effective for me. And I realized that I needed to apply biblical thinking to this, that I can't motivate myself by pursuing my own fame, by pursuing my own glory, any of those things. That's just not motivating enough to
Mhm.
me. But what was motivating was to go to scripture and find out that, oh, God has something to say about being productive. God calls us to be productive so we can do good to others and bring glory to him. See, now that is motivating. If I can live my life
Yeah.
in such a way that I'm bringing glory to God, and I know I'm bringing glory to God by doing what's good for other people, now I'm motivated to live the kind of life I think God calls me to live. So now I can take all those implementation principles and I can apply them. But now I've got a great goal in mind, something that's very motivating, something that deeply affects me, which is I want to do good for other people. I know that as I do good to other people, God receives the glory.
What were some of the verses that you were thinking about when you were like? I know it's a long time ago, and I don't want to put you on the spot of describing your train of thought a few years ago. But are there any verses that you dwell on about productivity that kind of stick out for you?
I think for me, it was more an overall scriptural
Mm.
approach. So we've got these verses that call us to make the best use of our time. Okay, I understand that. We've got um, several verses, either from Jesus and then in the epistles as well, calling us to do good works, calling us to that kind of life. There's that
Mm.
verse in Titus. I don't remember the reference, but to be good work zealots. So we hear a lot about zealots and zealotry and extremists and all that. And here's the Bible calling us to be extremists. We're to be as extreme in doing good works as evil people are in carrying out their evil, terrorists are in carrying out their terror. We're to have that kind of drive, motivation to do good for others. And so all of
Extremely
this
good.
extreme, yeah, be extremely good in extreme ways, to go to any extent, any degree to do what's good for others. And so that, to me at least, was tremendously motivating. So at the end of the week, I'm not sitting down and thinking, what can I do to make myself feel good this week? It's looking outward. Who has God called me to serve, and how can I serve them in the week ahead? Now that gets me going.
Yeah, I mean, even even I remember reading the Tony Reinke's book on literature, lit, and there was this equation that he set up with, okay, you want to read books, but you want to be intentional about your reading of books. And I thought of that verse, teach us to count our days, type of deal, that we are in fact mortal, that we have finite, limited time here on earth to do the things that we want to do. And so if we want to do them, we can flow with the wind and the waves and do something, but really don't leave any impact in the different relationships that we have, or in that case reading books. And he's like, hey, if you read one book a week, and you read 52 books a year, and let's say you read for 40 years, you got a limited time to read books. And so you want to think through like how you read books and why you're reading books, and you want to get different tastes of different types of books. And the same thing with sermons and preaching. Like, hey, if you're a preacher and you get let's say you're only preaching one service, and that's on Sundays, and you get 52, if you're preaching every single Sunday that year, you only get a certain amount of time with your people to teach them things. And so I think there's a little bit of wisdom in that, like, be aware that you're not here forever. And so one of the things that I loved about your book is that you asked the reader to make a mission statement for the various responsibilities that they have. Like, what is your actual goal with your kids, with your wife, in your work, for your church? And can you just describe a little bit about what your book deals with there, and how you lay it
Yeah.
out?
So the idea is that we want to have these checkpoints in life where we can ask, how have I been carrying out this task, and how will I in the future carry out this task? And so you think about being a husband, or let's call it an area of responsibility. God has given me certain responsibilities that come with marriage. So what does it look like to succeed before the Lord, before my wife, in marriage, or as a father, or in my vocation, or in my church? I think it can be very helpful to say at the end of the week, ask, how did I do? Well, how will I know how I did in this area if I don't have some sort of mission, if I don't know what it means to succeed? And so that's where a mission statement of sorts can come in handy. And these things can change over time, they can be adapted. But at the end of the week, I want to be able to look and see, how did I do this week as a husband? Well, here's what my mission is as a husband: to love my wife as Christ loves the church. Did I do that this week? And yes or no, I can sort of evaluate a little bit. And then I can think, okay, in the week to come, how can I succeed at that? What are the things I need to do? What are the actions I need to take? What are the attitudes I need to take up on myself in order to do this well? And so I think those mission statements, they just drive us toward fulfilling our mission to success in each of those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I've wondered, has the book been translated to various different languages, or is it
Yeah,
mostly
several anyways. Yeah,
yeah. Has it, so you're in Canada, right?
correct.
And what is the culture there like? Would you say it's similar to American culture with regards to the view of productivity and that type of stuff?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
It's interesting because Canada is a very heavily immigrant influenced culture. There's been a large wave of invited immigration into Canada. And many of the people who come in, they come in as white collar workers and very highly motivated to
Mhm.
succeed in this new country, very highly motivated to give their kids a good life. So yeah, absolutely. It's a very hardworking, straight up, little leisure kind of culture. So similar to the US, similar to the UK, probably a little less similar to parts of Europe, which can be a little more laid back.
Yeah, because I was thinking that specifically because I know there's a lot of French influence, specifically on the eastern side of when you go to Quebec and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering about that. Have you gotten feedback from other cultures that are less productivity driven or goal oriented, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's been translated, I believe, into Spanish and Portuguese, so down into Latin America. And as they've translated it there, the messaging has been, we need this book. Um, but by definition, there's a language barrier there, so I don't get a ton of feedback. So the
Yeah.
feedback would go to either somebody who helps handle my Spanish language stuff, So I've heard good feedback, but probably not enough to really draw too many conclusions from.
Yeah,
And
because I
I've
was
taught the material all over the world too. I've taught it in other continents and other places where the view of day-to-day work is certainly very different, either because they just have different backgrounds, or different attitudes toward work, or work is much more hand to mouth rather than the kind of leisurely, um, information type work that you and I would deal with, where the whole week is kind of laid out before us. We can just do what we want with it. We can prepare a
yeah.
sermon on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, whatever we want. So, yeah, I think there are principles there that transcend culture. So no matter who you are, no matter where you live in the world, you're to do good to others for the glory of God. No matter where you are, you have areas of responsibility, and we'll want to consider how you are succeeding or failing in those things. But then the nitty gritty of life will vary so differently. Even the way you would think about life, or the cultural attitudes toward work and success, all those things would vary drastically.
Yeah, because I was thinking when you said earlier that you're not naturally a type of organized person or that type of stuff, but you like the idea of it, or I forgot how exactly you worded it. I was like, "Amen, brother, amen." That's completely that's
Mhm.
me right there. Because I get butterflies in my stomach thinking about just being organized, and theoretically, man, I love thinking about, okay, what could this week look like. It's just, it feels like my life has been such chaos for the last 6 years, or ever since children were introduced to it, that I'm just kind of like almost giving up on the dream. And I'm wondering if that's more of Icelanders too, because there's this saying in Iceland, "Þetta reddast," meaning it's all going to work out. That is like almost no one does like planning, financial planning for their household. Like I know very few people who are Icelandic who actually make a budget. But there's a lot, this big thing in our mentality of tataretast, and I wonder, yeah, how it's gone over with other cultures
Sure.
and that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think every culture has its cultural strengths and cultural weaknesses. And sometimes your greatest strengths are very closely related to your greatest weaknesses. So I would suggest probably more Canadian Christians would maintain budgets than what you're describing there. I think that would be somewhat normal here, perhaps not widespread, but just generally normal. But then that comes with the same attitude that would drive people to overwork, and no
Mm,
matter how much they
yeah.
work, to feel like they're failing. So you could have two cultures, one where people do very little and consider themselves having done a great job or having done more than enough. Other people do tons and can never rest. So culture is so different. I'm endlessly fascinated by culture, especially as I travel more and more. Just fascinated to see how we as Christians are inculturated. And what we generally don't want to do is become a different culture within our own. We need to, in some ways,
Yeah.
listen to the ethos of our culture and learn to succeed within it. So to be hardworking sometimes in a laid back culture, to be laid back in a too hardworking culture, it's really hard balance to find.
Yeah, I mean, I've been wondering about this, and just maybe this is God's grace of saying, this culture is going to teach that culture this, and then the opposite is true for for that relationship, and just thinking about this thing that this mentality that it's all going to work out. It does lead to overworking, because you may not be, like you were saying before, about sort of mission statements. Because I'm thinking, when you were talking about that, I was like, man, if Icelanders are listening to this, they're probably thinking, who is this guy saying I have to have a mission statement for my family? Like, what a ridiculous notion. It's all going to work out, um, but I think it leaks into other parts of our lives if we're not clear on what the objective is, and how we can measure if we're being good at our job as a husband or as a dad or as a worker. um, that way, I think maybe even unconsciously it's going to cause us to be frustrated, because we never really know where we stand, and it's going to spring a leak into other areas of our life. If I don't know how I'm doing at my job, and I'm constantly frustrated over a goal that I don't know what it is, or when I'm reaching it, or how I'm reaching it, then I come home and I may be a worse father for it, because
Mhm.
it shows. And so yeah, I
Well, by
think there's a
having a
valuable lesson
mission,
there.
Yeah, by having a mission, you might find you're actually doing better at your job than you think you are. It doesn't
Mm.
necessarily indicate you're going to be doing worse than you think you are. But how would you know unless you kind of know what you're pushing toward? And I'm sure there's other ways other than mission statements. These things aren't in the Bible. The Bible doesn't say you need to have a mission statement that defines your relationship with your wife. It doesn't say that, but I think it can be a valuable tool. We have to be careful not to get all legalistic about it, and then not to judge ourselves too harshly if we don't have one. And there's all sorts of ways this can go wrong. So these are just tools that are hopefully meant to help us assess the ways in which we're, I hope, living with a clear conscience before God and man, and having a sense that we're succeeding at what God has called us to, especially those most important things. For years, I kept this little quote on my desk by William Carey. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm succeeding at things that don't matter. And lots of people have been attributed with that quote, I
Yeah.
believe. But I mean, it's a huge thing, isn't it? We can
Yeah.
succeed at a lot of stuff that at the end of the day doesn't matter. All the while, we're failing at the things that matter most to God and the people around us. So that's what I really was afraid of, is succeeding at things that in the end will just be useless. Meanwhile, I've lost my kids, I've lost my marriage, I've lost my church, I've lost something that God says is central to my life.
Yeah, and I think this is a good time to be talking about specifically that, because in the end, something is going to grab our attention. Something is going to take up our time, our energy, our resources. They're going to go somewhere, and if we're not intentional about them, if we don't give them a place, then it's just going to, go away. And I think, like right now, and I've seen on your website, you've been blogging a lot about COVID-19, social isolation, that type of stuff. And what do you have to say for people that right now may be succeeding at Netflix binge watching, and not so much other areas that have eternal significance or God glorifying implications? Like, I know you've been thinking a lot about this, so I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, do you have thoughts for the people?
My thought is most people are feeling a significant amount of guilt over their handling of things so far. But I think we have to grant ourselves some grace here. So there's never grace for watching pornography. There's, like
Mm,
I mean, there is grace. If you've been doing that, God will forgive you if you repent. But, there's never an excuse to do that. We shouldn't be
yeah.
binge watching useless shows on Netflix. On the other hand, what we're going through now, I saw a writer I track out of Africa who used a phrase I really, really appreciated. He talked about collective trauma, and he was going back to his background in Africa and just how some of there were some cultural things there where the culture together went through traumatic events, and he was applying that to this. I think there is something to be said that our culture and localized culture, Icelandic culture, Canadian, we're going through this great trauma together. I would not expect that in the midst of a very traumatic event, we're going to be at our absolute best. We're going to be our most
Mm,
productive selves. I think our minds are very distracted. Our hearts are distracted. We're concerned about economics. We're concerned about providing for our family. We're concerned about keeping our homes. We're concerned about all of these things. Meanwhile, we're not able to participate in the means of grace that God has given us for our joy, for our sustenance, and some of them, but we can't take
yeah.
Lord's Supper. We can't watch baptisms. We don't get to hear conversion stories. We don't get to sing together. We don't get a preacher looking us in the eye and saying, God forgives you for your sin, as he might during the assurance of pardon during a sermon. I mean, the service, there's so much that's been denied to us right now. So I think a lot of Christians are feeling lost and flailing. And I think, well, of course we are. This is a major collective trauma we're going through. So grant yourself some grace. Don't deliberately waste time. Don't let yourself off the hook for sin or anything. But I don't think it should be a shock if you're not doing great right now.
Yeah, but now a lot of people have a lot of extra time, and this actually this cultural, what did you call it? Cultural
Trauma.
trauma. It's interesting because it's not even just localized. It's like it's almost brought so many different cultures together that it's like worldwide cultural trauma that everyone can
Yeah.
relate to.
Yeah.
Like I remember, like it's weird for me because I'm Icelandic, but I remember the day of September 11th,
Mhm.
and I remember coming home during recess at school, seeing the TV, and sort of grieving with America. But it was so far away. It was so yeah, it was so distant that I didn't really identify with the pain, although I not emphasized. I uh, I felt with them. I
Empathized.
empathized. There you go. Um, but it's almost brought together the entire global church that we can say, yeah, we're going through this together.
Mhm.
But right now, one of the good things that come from this is a lot of people have extra time. And I'm thinking that right now it's understandable that you're trying to just adjust to this new life. I mean, my wife had been thinking about maybe, she wanted to grab the kids out of school early and try to start homeschooling a part of the day. And all of a sudden this thing hits and it's just like, well, now you got all the kids at home all the time and good luck,
We're homeschooling.
and
Yep.
so that was very interesting experience. But I'm thinking, okay, what do you think people can be doing right now to think clearly about setting goals in their lives, think clearly about, okay,
Sure.
what is my role here?
Well, I think we've got a serious time now. Now, not everybody has a time you or I would, where many of our responsibilities have been taken away. You're not as active in the church. I'm not traveling to conferences. You and I would, I think, be largely representative. Not everybody is in the same boat, but many are. I think we've got time to think about life in a way we haven't before. Not only that, we've had a lot taken away from us, which is a time for us to reevaluate when life comes back online. What do we want to go back to doing? And what are some things where we're saying, you know what, that's okay. I'm not missing that at all. Why was I doing that anyway? So I
Mm,
would expect a lot of lessons our kids are going to, or sports they're playing, or those sorts of things. For me, I'm thinking some of the travel I've been doing, some of the conferences I've been at. I mean, I went from extremely busy to nothing, and it's been an adjustment, but it's been very clarifying in its own
yeah.
way. And so I think people can use this time to prayerfully consider their lives and to consider what do they want their lives to be made up of. I'm hoping pastors and elders are doing the same in their churches. Everything's been taken away. We're gonna probably, it's unlikely that one day the switch is gonna flip and suddenly we can go back to doing everything. So
Yeah.
probably the path forward is slowly adding things back. Most churches probably only need to add back about half of what they were doing before, and they'll be totally fine, and their people will be well
Yeah.
served. Um, so I think it's a great time to evaluate, and then you can think through areas of responsibility. What has God made me responsible for? How can I know if I'm succeeding or failing in those things? We've got a time here to think about life, to think about the Lord, to think about what He's called us to.
What do you have? I know you have a bunch of resources on Challies.com. You got forums that, will almost like equip you and help you think through these things. What are some of the resources that you have there right now that you would recommend to people?
Sure. So, Do More Better, the book, grew out of a blog series I wrote about Christians and productivity. So, if you go online, you can find that series. The book is better edited, etc. But the content is roughly the same. So, you can go online, find the Christian and productivity, and just read your way through that. On Ligonier Connect, they're offering that for free now. Ligonier's Connect platform. I think this is one of the free things they're offering, their teaching series. I did a teaching series on productivity, so you might be able to take it there as well, ligonier.org.
So
But yeah,
that's a
if you
video
find
format.
that's a video format
Yeah.
of me teaching this material. Yep. So I think there's lots of ways you can learn material like this. It's not long, as you know, it's like 100-page book. It moves briskly. So I think just try and absorb material like this, or read Matt Perman's book or something else that's about productivity, and just you're going to have the chance to rebuild your life. You probably can have, this is one of those times in life where you can maybe do a little bit of a switcheroo, and get
Yeah.
away with it, without having to interrupt life. Life's already been interrupted. So I'd say take the opportunity.
Yeah, because I was reading a book on smartphone usage, and I've been interested in that topic for a while. But there was this, there are different theories. You can, okay, avoid it altogether. Just go get a flip phone that only calls and texts, and you don't need anything else. Or there are others who advocate this kind of phone detox thing, where you
Hmm.
just like you you take every app off of your phone, and then you figure out really, you have to think through, okay, what apps do I truly need and what truly helps me? And so something like Google Maps would be something that's truly helpful for a lot of people getting around, or getting access to your bank account, or being able to use your card through your phone and that type of stuff. But one of the things, so I've done that, and I've done the detox, and then I've slowly added to it, and then all of a sudden a tsunami of useless apps started filling
Yep.
up my phone. Meme making apps and that type of stuff. So I'm wondering, as like, because for us this is the perfect opportunity to reevaluate, but it's also kind of scary, because as we start progressing into life as normal, it is kind of scary to me that we just fall back into the tracks that are laid before us, that we go mindlessly and without really thinking about what we should be doing versus what we don't really have to do, or what's less important. Are there any ways that you would encourage people to, like, okay, do, because what I love about your content is you want to be intentional about this, and
Hmm.
that's something that even Icelanders are very bad at. They're bad at being intentional, and sometimes they misunderstand. If you're intentional, it's almost like you're not relaxed, you don't enjoy life, you don't, and so are there any things that you would say to the Christian who's thinking, okay, life is going to be, here it's the 4th of May, they're going to relax some of the closing of institutions and that type of stuff, and start opening things up again. As we go into that, are there any verses that you think they need to keep this in mind, or how are you basically telling your family to go into
No, we're
this?
not quite there yet, but I think I'm thinking about it more on a church level, to be honest, and somewhat on a personal level. My family already doesn't do a ton. Like, we're not totally overtaxed. We just kind of do what
Yeah.
church asks of us, and my son's already pretty much moved out, though he's back now. My daughter's moving out, so we're sort of in a different phase, I think. Um, but yeah, I think it's going to be a process of just what is essential to carry out my calling for us as a church. What's essential? We're desperate to get back to morning worship. I mean, that is essential to the Christian life, that we get together and we worship, we celebrate word, prayer, sacraments, all of those things, singing. Like, we got to get back to that. But there's a whole lot else on the church calendar, and I think every little bit of it is up for grabs, up for reassessment in something like this, because why not? We've got the opportunity, and everything has to be added back deliberately. So I think
Yeah.
the same is true in your family. Whatever's been taken away, that you'll have to add deliberately. You'll have to make a decision. Are we going to do this again? Or when are we going to do this again? Why not just spend a little bit of time talking about it, praying about it? Do our children need to go back into sports? Do I need to restart my gym membership? These sorts of things that take our time, that take our money, that in one way or another just take over our days. The sheer volume of them can take over our lives. For me, travel. Do I need to travel? What is that taking away from me? What is that adding to the Christian world? All these sorts of questions. I think just prayerfully consider these things. We've got the opportunity.
Yeah. It's definitely had me thinking about eternal things more. Like, okay, when things get back to normal, am I going back to the same old routine, or am I going to assess things from an eternal perspective to see what lasts and what truly matters versus just the things I might enjoy doing that are not really that important?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think there would be two big mistakes in this whole situation, which is, one, not to see God's providence in it at all, and therefore not to think about what God might be asking of us. What might He be asking of the church in the West, the church in Iceland, the Reformed Church, whatever it is, whatever groupings you're part of, however you want to assess it. what is God asking of us, or what might God be teaching us, or requiring, whatever it is. The other mistake on the far side would be to be way too quick to say, I know exactly what God's up to. I know exactly what he
Yeah.
wants from us here. So I think there's this, I saw some people right away, day 2 of lockdown, they had this whole thing figured out. Here's what God means to teach us. Like, whoa,
Yeah.
now we don't know that yet. But I think as individuals, as families, as churches, let's pray about this. What has God revealed about us? What are our strengths? What are those things we're doing really well before him? What are our weaknesses? What are things we've been doing really poorly? Where have we been doing too little? Where have we been doing too much? I think this is going to expose a ton of stuff. Like in the business world, a lot of businesses are going to fail. The ones that make it will probably come back stronger in a
Mm.
business perspective, leaner, more focused. I think churches will be the same. Some churches, maybe they won't survive this for whatever reason, but as we come back online as churches, I'm hoping we're stronger and more focused than ever before. I'm hoping, one of the things I'm hoping from all this is that church again becomes ultra local. I think
Yeah.
we could spend a lot less time thinking about like reformed movements, worldwide movements, all of this kind of stuff, and more time focusing on the local church, less time online blabbing about what this person said in that far off country and that far off church that has no relevance to me whatsoever. Instead, focusing on what's God doing in my church. How can I serve these people? I don't know that that's what God's up to. I'm not there yet, but I'm
Yeah.
hoping that's one thing that comes out of it.
That will be interesting because we would be moving from a hyper international, hyper online world to maybe seeing the deficiencies of all this. Like even the fact that I'm speaking to you right now, it's not going to be the same as sitting down with you and hanging out, or
Right.
what God's surprising in me that came so quickly is just because I'm a super introverted person. And one of the things
Mhm.
I find it so ironic that so many pastors I meet are super introverted people and they
Yeah.
are exhausted after Sundays. I mean, there's like this group of people there, but like as soon as this happened, I started thinking, man, I can't wait to just hug my people again. Like I can't wait to
Yes.
see their faces. And it was so surprising to me because I've been throwing this joke around, like, that I was made for this. This is,
Right.
apparently, how I lived is called quarantine and, that type of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But
It's been
I mean,
easy
I'm
on me too
so
in some
surprised.
ways. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not been brutal for me the way it would be for someone who's far more extroverted. Yeah, I do miss the church
Yeah.
badly. I want to be around people and all of that. But I understand some people are really desperate in this in a way I'm not, because they thrive around people. I tend to thrive away from people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you there. But
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
surely for this is driving extroverts to self-reflection and driving introverts to want to be around others.
yeah, because it's interesting because like I love the people, but I just like that kind of environment just drains me. Like what refills my tank is to have a book or walk around the lake and pray, or have an audiobook play and something like that, being by myself. But I was so surprised, just that longing immediately jumping up, just like, man, what a sad reality. I don't get to see my family this Sunday and worship with them.
Yeah.
That
And as
is,
pastors, I think there's an even deeper level in that your identity is found, or can be found, in shepherding people. And what are you as a pastor if you can't be around your people? Who are you? I think pastors, and you have this longing to care for people, and now you can't in the same way. So I think for pastors, this one's an especially deep hardship in some ways for those reasons. Even pastoring in a lockdown situation is very difficult, because so much of pastoring happens by the by. You're in your office and somebody comes by, or you're seeing them on Sunday or Wednesday nights or whatever, and you just bump into people and you have chances to
yeah,
engage with them, to talk with them. You have a lot of pastoring happens in those kind of inadvertent contexts. Right now,
yeah,
every single bit of pastoring you're doing is you deliberately reaching out to people and being like, hey, how are you doing? Rather than just bumping into each other in the halls at church. I'm finding that really hard.
yeah. And one of the things that it makes me be, as we think about productivity, as we've gone through this COVID thing, and so everything switched over from face-to-face meetings to just calling someone or Skyping with someone. Is that I get really frustrated because I'm kind of like, okay, here's the book of Acts, here's this amazing community, and they're all living their lives together. I would love that. Theoretically, I would probably be drained in actuality doing that. But man, like, I love this. I want to see this happen. But my frustration has always been work. I mean, we got nurses, we got night shift security guards, we got, grocery store workers and scientists, and they're all on different schedules. So some of them
Hmm.
work from home, some of them work at the office, some of them get an hour for lunch, some of them get half an hour. What this has taught me is like, man, I never realized like I could actually be in touch with everyone on my phone throughout the week. And
Yep.
I don't have to, even just to check up on them. Hey, how can I pray for you? How can I love on you? Can I run to the grocery store for you or the kids or anything like that? Like, are there ways we can serve one another?
Hmm.
That's opened up a whole different thing for me. Just like, oh, I can actually be way more productive about this because we've got
Yeah.
two special needs kids, and there's a time frame I have to be at home to help with taking care of the kids and getting dinner ready and getting them to bed. And I've always been frustrated that like I can't get in touch with all my people. And this has kind of opened my eyes to, okay, this might not be a replacement from one-on-one meeting, but this can give me an opportunity to get in touch with everyone in my church in 2 weeks or 3 weeks if I just call X amount of people per day. And that's
Yeah.
actually been something I've been really thinking about. Okay, how can I do this? How can I set up a schedule and be intentional, even though Icelanders probably going to think that's not being genuine. It's like, oh, you have to schedule me in, like
Yeah.
you don't just call me out of the blue because you love me and care for me. um, so what are some of the just practical outworkings? Because your book gets really practical. You recommend some apps and some services online that you can use to
Yeah.
sort of set up your schedule and work through being more productive. Like what?
Sure. So at some level, every productivity system is going to depend upon tools. And I make the analogy of a doctor. When you go to the doctor, you're hoping your doctor has not bought the cheapest possible tools off Amazon or whatever, but he's bought some that are good, high quality tools. When it comes to productivity, we often try to use the cheapest, freest ones we can find. But I recommend finding good tools that will help you do your job and do it well. So one tool to help store your information, one tool to help you store and tell you what tasks are coming up that you need to do, and one tool to just arrange your time, manage your time, i.e. a calendar. So three tools. I think if you use them, you commit to using them and you use them well, you'll find they work very nicely together and they really can organize your life. And the thing I keep saying there is I'm never worried I'm going to forget information. I never worry I'm going to forget a meeting or appointment. I never worry that I'm going to forget to accomplish something I need to accomplish through no great strength of mine. It's just I've developed a system that does all of that stuff for me. And the joy of being organized and productive is really that you can trust your system. It's one of the great joys of it. You can trust your system to manage that stuff for you, which means your mind can just relax, your heart can relax. You're not going to be waking up in the night like, oh my goodness, I forgot to do this. You should be able to entrust all that to a system and trust that the system will do it for you.
So like, because I know you're a busy guy and you answer
Used to be.
emails. Well, yeah, yeah. But you answer emails quicker than anyone I know. It's been really surprising to me to see how fast you get to it. Like, can you tell me some of the rules that you have for yourself? Because you have a certain way of thinking about the inbox and certain way of thinking
Yeah.
about archived emails and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I teach a method there for answering emails, and this varies a lot depending on the person, depending on how many emails they get, whether they're critical or not. So these things vary. But for me, I like to keep inbox zero. And so unless I'm doing heavy duty writing, like shut everything down, I'm working on my sermon, I'm working on a book or something, then yeah, I tend to answer emails quickly because I like to keep my inbox thin down to almost nothing. So there's other ones I put off for a while. They take a lot of effort, but my general rule is if an email can be answered in 10 seconds or less, or 30 seconds or less, just answer it right away, get it out, then come back later and sort of batch your way through the long ones. But otherwise, like, what's the point of waiting 2 days to answer an email? It's going to take you 10 seconds. Just get rid of that thing as
Yeah.
quick as you can.
Okay. And what are some of the apps that you use? So one of the things I was having difficulty wrapping my head around was the way you store things. You recommended an app in your book that was
Evernote?
that Evernote. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I, for the life of me, could not understand the point of Evernote. Like I was just sitting there. I'm like, okay, all I need now, I set up the system. All I need now is like something to put in here. Like, what do you
Fair enough.
use Evernote for?
Yes. So when I buy something, I snap a picture of the receipt on my phone and I put it into Evernote. When people send emails that I need to keep for some reason, it goes into Evernote. People send me documents I need to keep, off to Evernote. So it just holds information. My tax returns, the government sends it to me once a year. It goes into Evernote. If I need to know where my tax returns are, somebody asks for it or whatever, um, I know exactly where it is. So it just stores that kind of stuff for me.
So it just gives you a peace of mind knowing that if I ever need to access any of this information, it's on there.
Right. I don't have to go sorting through big piles of paper. I don't have to go sorting through 100 different folders on my desk. I just search in Evernote for tax return. Boom, there it is. There they all are for the last 10 years or whatever.
And then you recommend a to-do list app. You
Yeah.
there was this German
To-do
sounding
list.
app. Well,
There's
Todoist,
Wunderlist and Todoist.
Wunderlist.
Yeah, Wunderlist I think has just been Microsoft bought it or something. So I think
Okay.
that's the one. But yeah, I recommend Todoist as a place to store tasks. So what do I need to accomplish today? It will store those tasks. It's really good at just bling, hey, remember today, this is due. So get it done. That's its purpose. It's great. And then the other thing I recommend is just a calendar, something to essentially take time and allow you to fit tasks or fit things into time, meetings and appointments. So you remember from 3 to 4 today, I'm going to be on a call, and make sure that you get reminded of it and you're there when you said you'd be there. I think that's just Christian virtue. You know, if you say you're going to
Yeah.
do something, do it. And so a lot of these things are
Yeah,
just
your
the
yes, BS.
outworkings of being, I hope, being sanctified, which is what my yes
Yeah.
be yes, exactly. So if I say I'm going to be somewhere at a certain time, I need to be there. So what do I need to put in place to make sure that happens? If I say I'm going to accomplish something, I'm going to hit a deadline. That's not just some vague statement. It's a moral responsibility upon me now. And so what do I need to do in order to make that happen?
And so the way you set it up is you have a to-do list for your family, you got a to-do list for your work, to-do list for I think you like, and that's one of the great things about your book. You mention all these categories in your book that you give examples of how you set your thing up,
Yeah.
and when you have your mission statement, you can sort of start filtering your task through this mission statement of yours.
Mhm.
Like, okay,
Yeah.
if doing this for my family, is it really just ultimately what something I want to see done, or am I actually loving my family well through this,
Yeah.
or fathering my children well, or helping them grow in faith or anything like that? Like, or you can evaluate, am I doing too much of fun stuff with my kids and not enough of actual like teaching them or pointing them to Christ in one way or another? And
Okay.
so I really recommend that. Just to tell you like what I experienced when I did this, I really liked it, and so I started adding a bunch of categories, and I started adding everything in there until I got
Yeah.
way too overwhelmed with the system. I think I had in the end like 8 different categories and probably like 100 things to
Yeah.
do, and I started avoiding the app to not get
Yep.
overwhelmed.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Like any system can break down if it gets too unwieldy, if there's too
Yeah.
much friction to using it. And so these things are infinitely adaptable. Your life is different from my life. So if those two things look the same, if our apps look the same, we're not doing it right. There's no objectively right way of doing this. It's just making it work for you. So as many categories or as few as necessary, generally as few as necessary, is helpful. So
Yeah.
adapt the system fully to your needs.
And I think it's actually like, this is something that's simple, that's gonna offer you a peace of mind and to allow you to be there for your kids. At least the way my mind works is that I'm always scared that I'm going to forget something, that
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I have to remember, I gotta get my, jacket to the sewers so they can fix it or something like that. If I don't have it stored somewhere, I will not stop thinking about it. And it's going to interrupt my time with my kids, my time with my family, my time
Right.
reading the word, and
Yep.
so I think this ultimately is going to bring a lot of good fruit in people's lives. And so I would
Good.
definitely recommend. There's one more thing I wanted to hit on. Explain your way of
Okay.
using the calendar. You recommended not to use your calendar basically as a to-do list.
Right. So a
Rather
lot
than,
of people use their calendar wrongly, which sounds funny because it's such a simple thing. But a lot of
yeah,
people use a calendar as essentially a way of storing information or as a way of tracking tasks. And that's not what it's meant for. It's meant to display time and display how much free time you have and how much booked time you have, how much of your time is available and how much is already claimed. That's the best use for a calendar. And then through electronic calendars, we get this nice thing that it can ping you and tell you, like, 30 minutes from now you have an appointment, you need to get in the car and drive. It can even track traffic now and stuff and say, hey, it's time for you to get going. So some neat things. But yeah, don't overuse your calendar. Don't try to do too much with it.
yeah, that's what I was doing when I read your book. I used it as a to-do list, and then
Hmm.
once I couldn't do it, I just shifted it over to the other week.
Right.
And so,
And you can, if that works for you, so be it. But I don't think that's enough for most people. I don't think
yeah,
that's bound to succeed for too many.
no, and I tried it your way, and it helped out a lot. But
Good deal.
so I just want to thank you. So I want to recommend people. Man, thank you for serving the church in such an awesome way, and not just your church, but
Glad to.
just the global church. Like, just so you know that your stuff is being used here. Logan Douglas, who is one of our elders, and he's about to plant a church. He was leading men's group, a lot of time offering printouts from your website. And I just want to thank you for your amazing work that you put into this, and
Good.
and point people to your book, Do More Better. You also have others, visual theology. I'm horrible with
Visual theology, two in that series. I've got a book called Devoted, which is about women or men whose primary spiritual influence was their mother. It's a book written primarily for women, though anyone can read it. And then my new book, Epic, which describes my round the world journey I took recently to track down Christian history.
that's
So
oh see, I hadn't even heard. Is this a new release?
just came out last week. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yep.
Man, that sounds like a
Yeah.
really awesome book. Was there a specific, specific portion of history you were looking at there?
It was all of history, really, 2,000 years of history, tracked by traveling around the world, 24 different countries, looking for objects that would tell a story beyond themselves. Maybe we can talk about that on the next podcast. I got 3 minutes, and then I got to be
Yeah.
on to
Yeah.
my next one.
All right. Very productive. Very, very scheduled of you. But I just want to say thank you so much for taking this time. I really
Pleasure.
hope we can have you over here sometime and maybe get you to teach some of your stuff if you've got time for it. Or
Love to. That'd be awesome.
yeah, you can't do that if you're traveling to 24 countries though. So
Right. All right,
but
man. Thanks
man,
again.
God bless you. Thank you for your work.